Hello, and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to have a lot of fun today. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick trip out to Nosara, Costa Rica, and talk with our buddy Craig Sutton. Why? Because it's the hottest billfish destination around right now. They're double-digit on sales. They're catching marlin just about every day. It's incredible. Then we're going to come home to Florida. We'll start up in the northeast corner with Captain David Voorhees, and we'll work our way all the way south, down through Nick Stancic and the Keys, up through the West Coast, and out the Panhandle, so we can get a handle on just exactly what the fish are doing, where the migrations are headed, and what areas are hot and what areas are not. We're also got a special treat tonight. We're going to check in with the inventor and manufacturer of DOA lures, Mark Nichols. Mark is a Florida-based company that has kept everything in Florida, has all his production here in the USA, and I guess we've all used his lures. I thought they were deadly on just about everything, but I got a lesson from him just a few weeks ago about something I never dreamed of. So let's get rolling. This week's podcast and every week's podcast is brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people back to nature. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. All right, we're taxiing to a stop, and guess who's standing here with two cool margaritas for us to sip on? None other than Craig Sutton. Craig, how's life in Nosara?
Captain Ricky, it's great, buddy. Absolutely great.
What are they catching?
Sailfish. A couple big tuna, yellowfins, the smaller ones, and then the proverbial nice-sized mahi.
Good deal.
Another week, we got a couple of those 40-plus pounders, big old slabs. Now, the sailfish bite did slow up last week. That big school of fish that we were fishing for, I guess, almost 3 weeks moved off, but, it's still real good. And we did some inshore fishing, some rooster fish. No caberas, though. We didn't catch a cabera last week.
Huh. But the sails are still dependable, just not overpowering them like they were a few weeks ago, huh?
Yeah, they're still there. I mean, Ricky, we almost never go an 8-hour trip without catching several. And no matter what time of year. Last week they were on fire. The school that we fished last week had not been hit on as it moved up the coast like the school I fished on Friday, my first day down there 2 weeks ago. And anytime you catch a school that hadn't been pounded all the way down the coast from Golfito, Cape, really Panama, Golfito, Capos, Los Sueños, they're pretty doggone aggressive. But we'll take what we can get, and it's still happening down there, and it's still real good. So.
The one thing in common, every time I look at a picture from your place, it's got big fish on it. Usually, it's got a pretty girl in it, and the ocean's always calm.
Yeah, it is. When I was down there that Monday before I came home, my friend that's in Avianis, which is south of Tamarindo, he's only 36 miles north of us. And every time he fishes with me, he tells me over and over, he says, you don't understand, this is a completely different ocean than 38 miles north of us. I think I've told y'all before, there's a wind line that forms a lot of times in January, February, and March. And it's like an invisible wall that goes as far out to sea as you can, as far as you can see. It's like it'll be 3 to 5 on one side and 1 foot or less on the other side. And it's a defined edge. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But, it's there, and it's there all the time. But, we're on that calm side of it, and it's just fine with me. I like it like that.
Now, Craigie, I would think that's because of the closeness to the mountains.
It is. It's the wind coming through the mountains,
right,
which creates it. But the offshores up in Tamarindo north of us are way harder, especially during January, February, and March. Now, every once in a while, we'll have maybe 1 or 2 days of real hard offshores, and they coincide with the fronts off the east coast of the United States.
Gotcha. All right, buddy. Well, look, as always, we thoroughly appreciate it. Craig, tell people how they can get a hold of you for the billfish trip of a lifetime.
They can reach me at 904-591-2161, and they can get me, Craig, at fishingnosara.com.
I am already lying awake thinking about my next trip down there. Thank you, buddy. Now we're going to come home. We're going to go up into the Northeast and talk with Captain David Voorhees. David, how are you?
Hey, Captain Ricky, I'm doing just fine, buddy.
I'm thinking this little warming trend that's got my air conditioner running has probably got your fish biting.
Boy, you're not kidding. What a difference a week makes. I mean, last week I was singing the blues about being cold and, hard to catch these fish. But I tell you, we had an outstanding week this past full moon. And, you ask what was different between now and then was, well, we got these low tides later in the evening, and we also got plenty of sunlight to bake these flats and get them nice and warmed up. But I still found most of my fish concentrated in deep holes. We found fish up on the flats, Rick, but we really had a hard time getting them to bite. They were up there, but they just were really, really hard to get them to bite. Still seeing some dirty water. We got some more rain this week coming in, so the dirty water has been making it a little tough. But yesterday, Rick, I sat at the mouth of a creek, and you would have thought it was the 4th of July or Memorial Day weekend with all the boats on the water. But, you pretty much had to there was no fish in the intercoastal yesterday. So what I did was sneak back into some of these creeks, and on that outgoing tide, I'll go all the way to the end and fish that mouth of it. We did pretty good fishing that way.
David, are you throwing lures at all yet, or is it still all bait because of the cold water?
It's still all bait. We saw the water temperature come up into the 60s now, so we're up around 65, believe it or not. So I think it's just a matter of time that we'll be back to throwing some artificials and some plastic.
Sounds good.
So I think this warming trend will be, the sign of spring.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I got to tell you, your inshore report's a lot better than the offshore report, David. Bottom fishing, the poorest I've ever seen for the deep water bottom fishermen. Now, there's some sea bass around up at the Amberjack Hole and Haddock's Hideaway, HH. That area has got sea bass. But, boy, once you get out into what is usually just a bonanza this time of year out in 21 fathoms, it is non-existent. As good a fisherman as you and I know, Captain Roger Walker fished 15 or 16 spots between 120 and 140 feet last week on our only calm day, which was Thursday, and caught 2 beeliners and 3 amberjack. It was just brutal. Now, I talked to some natural bait trolling boats that fish the ledge with ballyhoo and spoons and such, and they completely blanked out. Nothing. Some of the high-speed wahoo guys picked off a few fish. In fact, congratulations to Captain Dan Parker for a 99.7. That is a really good one. Had another one about 46 to back it up. So there's been some good wahoo caught, David, but there is nothing to go with them. I don't know what's up with that. I talked to Matt Strait, our commercial fishing buddy. He said it's the same all the way up through Georgia, all the way up to the South Carolina border. So we just got to wait for this cold, nasty water to get out of here, and we should be back to fishing again. But tell people how they can get a hold of you if they want to go fishing.
Area code 904-708-8915, or go to backwaterfishingadventures.com.
Thank you, David. We appreciate it.
All right, Rick. Talk to you next week, buddy.
Now we're going to swing down to East Central. Hey, Jim, you know much about dinosaurs?
Personally know one or two that are still living.
Yeah, I understand. You know what I learned this weekend? You never mess with a Momosaurus. You know why?
Why is that?
You get Jurassic. That was a really bad dad joke.
That's okay. We'll let it slide.
Tell me about fishing in the East Central area.
Well, that moon. You can love that moon or you can hate that moon. And the end of last week, we were loving that moon.
Yep.
And then the beginning of this week, we were not liking it so much.
Now, tell me what moon phase you prefer.
Well, anytime there's a major or a minor, you typically get better activity. I like the days leading into the full moon.
Me too.
Much better than the days after the full moon.
Me too.
We're in the days after the full moon, and we were on fish all day. I mean, from 6:30 in the morning with my first charter until I come off the water at 4:30 in the afternoon with my second charter. And we had baits in schools of fish all day. And other than putting on a hardhead catfish clinic, about all we had to show for it, you know? It was really frustrating. Last week, the black drum bite was off the chain. I talked to some guys that got on some cobia offshore on Saturday. It was fantastic. And pretty much everybody I talked to at the beginning of the week just said, well, not so much, and including myself. We struggled to get a couple of bites out of the black drum today. You know, they were decent fish that we put to the boat. I think the biggest one was probably 38 or 39 pounds. But, man, when you're in schools of fish that are 50, 60, 80 fish, and they're not picking up your cut crab, they're not picking up your fish bites, they're not picking up your sand fleetus and your shrimp, it gets really, really frustrating after sitting there looking at them on the sounder for that length of time and not getting them to respond to anything that you're trying to get them to respond to.
I understand. What have you heard from offshore, Jimmy?
Not a whole lot, to be honest with you. We had cold, dirty water that kind of moved in. There was a little bit of clean water to the south down there from about Melbourne Beach down to Vero Beach. But everything from there north, the water was just really kind of dirty. And the kingfish bite was off. No real cobia to speak of in the middle or northern part of my section or my region. The one bright spot was there was a few sailfish that were picked up at about 220 to 240 feet of water outside of ponds. But other than that, it was a little bit of a struggle for the guys that were trying to, troll and get some of those pelagics.
You know, Jim, I've got a couple of theories about Atlantic sailfish. First off, I think whether we want to admit it or not, the ocean is rising and it is getting warmer. Now, we can get into who caused it or when it's going to stop, but that's another matter. But I think that big body of fish that you and I grew up with that was always in Fort Pierce in the wintertime, I think they're a lot more familiar with your area right now than they are the Fort Pierce area.
Yeah, or even north. There's a handful of guys in Canaveral that are legitimate sailfish guys. Ponce Inlet has a much, much larger congregation of guys that know how to pull a ballyhoo, how to pitch a bait, how to do the things that you need to do whenever you're looking for sailfish. And the guys out of Canaveral, the guys out of Sebastian, not quite so much. But you're right. You get to Fort Pierce, and all of a sudden there's a good crop of guys that know how to catch sailfish again.
But I'm convinced that the body of fish that they fished on and their fathers and grandfathers fished on are now much more, like you say, up near Ponce. I was just debating with Craig Sutton from Nosara about Atlantic sailfish, and he poo-poos Atlantic sailfish because Pacifics are bigger and all that. Yes, they are bigger, but I got to tell you, that's all about tackle. You take a 50, 60-pound Atlantic sailfish on something like a Saragusa, the new spinners from Shimano, something like a Talica 16s, the little high-speed reels now. Jim, it doesn't get any better than that.
No, you're right, Rick. We don't go spec fishing with 130s.
Right.
Because there's a reason. They're a whole lot more fun on a fiberglass game pole. So if you tackle your gear to that species, you can make it a whole lot of fun.
Oh, man.
That's kind of one of the reasons I named my fishing charter business Fine Line Fishing Charters, was because when everybody else was out there throwing 30 and 50-pound stuff, I was throwing 6 and 8-pound stuff at the same fish. You get way more bites, so you get way more opportunities for the customer to land that fish. And when you do it on the appropriate size gear, there is no better world-class fishing that you can do when you get the right size rod and reel with the right size fish. They don't have to be a world record, but the customer feels like they caught a world record because they caught a 6-pound trout on 6-pound test, or they caught a 30-pound cobia on 12-pound spin. And it's an accomplishment.
Jimmy, you and I have known each other for most of our lives. And as you know, I was fortunate enough to run a boat in the Bahamas for a number of years. And I've done blue marlin and I've done sailfish. And when it comes to my grandkids and I want to put them on a hot fish, I'm going to get either a little Shimano bait runner or I'm going to get a little Talica 16 and put them on one of those hot South Florida fish that just tear it up. I'm telling you, sailfish are fabulous fish if you fish them on the right tackle. If you fish them on your standard blue water tackle, no, there's not much to them. Give me that light tackle and that red hot fish, and I'm a happy boy. Jimmy, thanks so much for the report. Please tell me we can talk to you next week.
I look forward to it.
Now, we have the man himself, the inventor and manufacturer of DOA lures, Captain Mark Nichols. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Well, I got to tell you, I thought I had heard of everything you could catch being caught on a DOA lure, Terrorized being one of my favorites. I've watched George Labonte. He is a great tarpon fisherman. It's the only thing he'll throw. But I never thought that I would see one come out in Lake Okeechobee and be the number one lure we were fishing for speckled perch.
Oh yeah. It's funny that it's a perfect sized little minnow imitation. And when I designed that bait to begin with, I wanted it to do what a lot of the little small crappie jigs do, which is to set horizontal on a vertical drop.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, if you're fishing the pads for crappie, less is better. You start jerking the things around, they don't seem to want to eat. You put it there and let it sit right, then they're happy to eat it. And when that bait's sitting there and it's in the right position, then they want to eat it. Pretty happy with that little guy, and it's done real well for us. Of course, if I'm fishing Okeechobee, probably my first color would be chartreuse, and then go to some pinks and stuff like that. But then we started looking for the bigger critters, and being the small tarpon, and we stepped one size up in the Terrorized, but we also do use the tiny Terrorized also for some small tarpon.
And I have used the biggest Terrorized for blackfin tuna. Now, give me the chronology. The Terrorized was your second bait. The shrimp was your first bait. Is that right?
The shrimp was my first bait. The bait buster was my second bait. All of my baits have pretty much been designed where I was out fishing and I designed a shrimp because, I fished shrimp all my life and wanted to make a good artificial. So I started making one. And then I'm fishing with my buddy Greg Gentile one day, and we're here in South Florida, and I'll be darned if that stupid mullet run doesn't start. And my fish didn't want to eat my shrimp anymore. And so one night about 1 a.m, I made the first prototype bait buster because I needed a mullet, darn it. So I made this crude prototype, but it did what I wanted it to do. I was one of the early baits that put a jig head inside the body of a salt plastic. And I didn't do it to be inventive. I just did it because it seemed like the thing to do at the time. And that bait tracked really well. And at this point, we've got virtually 4 different styles of that bait, 3 different weights in the deep runner style, and then a shallow runner. And then the Terrorized came. Then is when I wanted something that would hold down in a strong current. That way I put that line entry on top of the head, and there's a good bit of flat in front of line entry, which wants to hold that nose down very much like a diving bill.
Now, so the Terrorized came along third, and that grew into an entire family of lures, really. If you figure that thing's used for everything from speckled perch to blackfin tuna, that's quite a group. But this time of year, it becomes deadly on your tarpon down there, doesn't it?
It's early, but, it's interesting. The way the weather is these days, a lot of the fish seem to be showing a little bit earlier just because it's so darn warm. I don't know if it's warm all over the world, but it's sure been nice here. That's why we live here.
You're exactly correct. I don't need a snow shovel. I don't.
Things, yeah.
Man, thank God for editing.
You don't even know how to say it, much less use one.
Thank God for editing.
Which is very intelligent of you.
Now, I got to tell you, because I'm bragging on you all the time, one of my favorite things is every lure, every tail, every jig head, everything's built right here in the USA, isn't it?
Yes, sir. We shoot them right here in-house down here in South Florida, and we're starting to do a good many of our own jig heads as well. I realized a long time ago that if I have something made in China, it means a whole lot of people, Americans, don't have jobs. It's not just the people that are in my building. It's the people that I spent $400,000 with plastic in Carolinas and $200,000 in hooks and with Eagle Claw in Colorado, and then $400,000 in Illinois for jig heads. And suddenly you realize you're keeping a whole lot of people busy by keeping your baits made here. And any product, not just fishing lures, but anything. You're keeping a whole lot of Americans busy when you keep your stuff made here.
Well said. Mark, welcome to the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter podcast. We're so glad to have you and DOA Lures, and promise me we can talk to you again soon.
Anytime, so I'll be more than happy to. I'll go try to catch some fish and make up some fish stories for you.
Thanks, Mark. We appreciate it. Mark Nichols, the inventor and manufacturer of DOA Lures, and a great personal friend of mine. Now we're going to stop in Miami and check with the mayor of South Beach, none other than Captain Alan Sherman. Alan, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. Rick, how are you guys doing?
Great. Absolutely. It's warm up here. Wintertime, I've declared it over. Now, I could use one or two more little chills, but I don't want any more bad cold.
Well, don't you have a big cold front heading your way within a day or so?
Hush yourself. Just hush yourself.
When you guys get these cold fronts, I mean, we get cold fronts here too, and the winds get strong and the weather gets nasty. But up there, you guys got to travel a long ways offshore. What do you guys do when the seas get 8 to 10 or more and the winds are blowing 15 to 25? Do you cancel? Do you
No, we
do you actually...
And I tell people all the time, Alan, it's funny you mention that. I tell them all the time, in the summertime, I check the weather once a week. In the wintertime, I check it once an hour. Because we get these little one-day windows, and you better take advantage of them. But, Alan, I don't know why our offshore fishing has been terribly slow this winter.
Oh, yours too.
Oof.
I can't explain it. It hasn't been great here either, and you really, really have to work hard to make a catch. But the guys that put the time in, catching bait, getting a variety of bait, and then hitting as many different areas out, whether it be in the ocean or in the bay, they're the ones making the catches. And, they may not be spectacular catches, but they're catches nonetheless. And the people come back with a positive attitude, a positive feel for the day. And that's how it's been. Now, fishing in the ocean inlets right now, it's been pretty good, especially at night. This week we're going to have some low tides in the late afternoons into the early evenings, and then very early in the mornings as well. And on those low tides, with the shrimp runs that we've had, there's been tarpon and snook feeding on these tides. The nighttime bite's probably been the best. But, there was another thing that I noticed a couple days ago when I was in the bay. That it's early for spring migration, but we do have some mullet schools in the bay. And I hadn't seen them in weeks past. So that's a sign that things are starting to happen, that some of these bait fish schools are going to start moving north your way and hopefully drag some fish with them. But I didn't see any fish feeding on these mullets. But if you drag a mullet through the ocean inlets, put them on a 7-0 hook, mustad, big gun, short shank hook, and slow troll him through an inlet on that outgoing tide, there's a really good chance you're going to hook up on some big tarpon. They're also going to eat large shrimp that are drifting through the inlet, and you can do that, by instead of using the mullet, but you put the shrimp on the hook, maybe a little smaller, and go with a circle hook, like say a 4-0 or a 5-0 circle hook on a shrimp, and that's how they're getting the tarpon in the inlet. To get the snook, they're fishing them a little deeper with a little bit of weight just to get them closer to the bottom, or they're fishing along the jetties. And that's where these snook bites are coming. And some of these fish are large. The tarpon, 100 pounds or better, and the snook anywhere from little pups to fish of 20, 25 pounds. So that's something fishermen might want to take advantage of. Over this past weekend, we had a lot of wind, a lot of easterly breezes, made it really rough out there. But it's calmed down a little bit, and it looks like it's going to be calmer for the rest of the week. So the guys that did get out this past weekend, there's been a decent king mackerel bite. And these fish are probably in the 5 to 15 pound range. They're schooled up at times. And I say that because, you can fish hours and not get a strike, and then all of a sudden you drift across a group and they eat everything on the boat. But those fish are out there to be caught. Some of the guys are targeting the outfalls. I don't like to talk about them too much, but it's part of the fishery out here. We have a few sewer outfalls, and it's an natural chum slip, and the fish know it. They go to it, and if you don't mind a little stink, and maybe it's more catch and release than catch and keep, but the action can be really good on the kingfish, the Spanish mackerel. Sometimes a sailfish will get in there because the ballyhoo schools will school up in those slicks, and they'll come in there and feed off them. So there's been some action around there. Otherwise, the action's been anywhere from 100 feet out to about 300 feet of water. You know, if there's an artificial reef or wreck in between those depths, that's where a lot of that activity is going to be. We've had probably a few more sailfish in the area than we've had in the past weeks or so. So there's some sailfish in the area, and they're feeding in those depths as well. There's been some small mahi-mahi dolphin out there, but they're really scattered. And the guys that are catching them by fishing for something else. They're fishing for the sailfish, they're fishing for the kingfish, and the dolphin come in and grab their baits. So on the surface, that's what we have going on. On the bottom side, over the artificial wrecks, you've got some big amberjacks, a few mutton snappers. The bottom fishing hasn't been as good as it's been, probably because of the weather. It's pretty tough to do that kind of fishing when the boat's bouncing up on a 3 to 6 foot, sea. But there are some fish on these artificial wrecks to be caught. I did get in and fish the bait this week, and the bait fish schools were more scattered than they've been. Still not much feeding on them, although there were a few Spanish mackerel mixed in a few of the schools. We had a mixed bag of snook, jack crevalles, mangrove snappers, and barracudas, fishing with live pilchards and artificials. That wraps it up for me.
Gotcha. Well, ain't nothing wrong with that report. That's good. I don't know what's up with offshore, but I sure hope spring straightens it out. It just hadn't been what we're used to for the wintertime, so maybe it'll get better. Thank you, Alan. We appreciate it.
Anytime, Rick. We'll talk to you next week.
Now, let's head on down to the fishiest place in Florida. You know it, you love it, Alamorada, and check in with the captain of the Broad-Minded, Captain Nick Stanzik. Nick, are you with us?
I'm here, Rick. How you doing?
Excellent, buddy. I'm glad to hear from you. Tell me about fishing on the Broad-Minded.
We got out a few different days the past week here, and we had some swordfish action. No big fish, but we caught one the first day that we tagged and released. Had a few blackfin tunas, nothing big. Caught some rosies while we were deep dropping. The next day we caught a pair of swordfish, both keepers, not big, but legal fish. Had a few mahi, which were nice, and then we had a big pomfret. And then the last trip I fished, we got one sword late in the day, about 5:15 p.m. And we'd almost given up. I said, let's try one more drop, and sure enough, it paid off. We did catch another pomfret that day, too. Which, we don't catch tons of pomfret. I usually catch, a couple a year, but we caught them on, I think, 3 of my last 5 trips, so there's a few around.
Are they edible?
They are. They're good eating. It looks like a black permit with hard scales on it. And the meat is kind of funny on them. It's almost like lightish pink. It's almost like a cross between tuna and wahoo. But they're good eating. We don't catch tons of them, but there has been some around because the last few weeks.
How big are they?
The ones we caught were 20 to 22 pounds. So
okay.
Decent size.
Yeah, that's good fish. That's real good fish. Have you heard anything from inshore?
Yep. Last week there was some good fishing. One of my old mate in training there, Bean, my buddy Brandon Storn, he just got his captain's license and he's done a couple charters. He took my dad and some of his buddies down. They caught 3 big tarpon one day, and one of the fish was really big, pushing 140, 150 pounds.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Back there in the bay, so there's some tarpon around. If it's, with these fronts still coming through late in the season, they're going to shut on and off, but nice to see some big tarpon. And there's been a few snook and red. I don't think it was red hot for them, but, the tarpon are making up for that.
All right, I had one more question for you. You mentioned that you were tagging and releasing the smaller swords. Have you ever caught a tagged sword, or have you ever had one of your swords re-caught?
I've never caught a tagged one. I've probably let go a couple hundred with tags now. I've had about 15 recaptures reported, and we just had one recently caught earlier this year off Cuba on the far side, closer to the Dominican Republic.
Uh-huh.
Went about 500 miles in 4 months. So he was moving. But most of the ones I've had recaptured have been between Miami and Palm Beach. The one up the far end of Cuba, he was all in. He was moving.
That's interesting. Thank you so much, Nick. We look forward to talking to you next week, if that's okay.
Yep, we'll be here, Rick. We'll talk to you then.
Nick's report, of course, and all of our reports are brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people back to nature. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils.
What?
Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is the mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. All right, time to head west. Let's head to 10,000 Islands and see if we can track down one Stephen Dahl. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great. No complaints here in the 10K.
I like that. Tell me what you're catching.
We have near 90 degree air temperatures. It's literally the first part of March, and the redfish are acting like it's October. So I'm not complaining, but it's really odd. Our this recent warming trend has really fired up the backcountry really good. Last couple weeks, snook bites been really, really good. And finally this past week, the redfish really responded, and nobody really saw it coming. And it's just really odd that they're chewing as well as they are. I guess their metabolism is just up from being fighting so many different cold fronts over the last few months, and got some nice warm stable weather, and it's really working. So the entire backcountry is fishing extremely well, and that's really 4 species. It's the redfish, snook, and trout, and then you can add the juvenile tarpon to that as well, because once that water temperature starts flirting with the 75, 80 degree mark, those juvenile tarpons start getting really active, and this past full moon phase really got them fired up now.
Steve, let me ask you a question. You mentioned the warming water and the fish getting more active. What's your magic number for the redfish to get? Because up here in Northeast Florida, man, they're in a funk. You can see them. They get up on those warm flats in the afternoon to get some of that heat from the sun. But, you couldn't get them to bite with a $20 bill. Give me a magic number for when they get aggressive again.
72 is kind of our magic mark. Once we start flirting with that, those 4 aforementioned fish are all in play. Even though the trout are a little bit more of a colder water fish, if you want to target all 4 of those fish specifically, which our region's really known for, is that backcountry bite, 72 is your mark. So once you get on, 3-4 straight days of really stable weather, this is a little unseasonable. We're supposed to have a small front come in and maybe knock that water temperature down probably into the low 70s, and I think we'll be really good. I'm almost concerned it's going to be a little too warm, and those fish are actually going to be a little lethargic here in a couple of days. So I'm welcoming a front coming in, albeit subtle, just to dip that water temperature down a little bit. You know what we have to have as fishermen? What's that?
Something to worry about.
You know what? It's so true. It's so true. There's always something wrong. That's the captain. She said true and true. You don't even have to do this for a living to be like that, too. There's always something wrong.
Oh, the water's too cold. Oh, the water's too cold. Oh, the water's too cold. Oh, the water's too hot. Too hot. It's getting too hot too fast. Yep, getting too hot. Yep. Ocean's calm now, but I can tell you it's going to get rough here in a minute. I promise.
Exactly.
Cap, as always, we appreciate it. Please tell me we can check in with you next week.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
I'm ready for the day that Steve Dahl's not in a good mood. I've never seen it, but I think that had to have happened at least once in his life. Now let's swing on up to somebody else who loves what he does for a living, Captain Greg Stamper from Snook Stamp Charters. How we doing, Snooky?
I'm doing real good, Rick. Cannot complain. I think Steve was a little mad when he wrapped up his prop a few weeks back and had to get a new lower unit, though.
Ooh, that'll do it. Yeah, that'll do it. I forgot about that. That's not good. Yep.
Yeah, I'm good, man. Been fishing. It's been an excellent week overall. We've had some wind, which has definitely had to change a few of the plans that we'd like to do. We weren't able to do much sight fishing this week anywhere. We just never really had clean water. It's close. On these very ends of these high tides, you see that clean water starting to come into our back bays. But unfortunately, it's going to take quite a few more days of tides moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out before the water starts to clean up enough where I can sight fish. But other than that, we did do well on redfish this week. They're starting to come back. It wasn't like full speed yet. We did catch some very, very nice fish, and I was so happy to see a lot of whitebait move back into our beaches, which probably tells me, Rick, if we continue to move down this path, and I'm already starting to see it a little bit in the back bay, but the snook are going to start coming out from those creeks and those rivers and way up in the back where they've been hiding, and they're going to come out and start feeding on that whitebait. It's going to start moving into our bays pretty regularly from any time from now and for months to come, which means there'll be other things coming with them.
Let me ask you a question. What is your personal favorite fish to fish for?
Well, my favorite fish to fish for, if it's just me and I get to pick whatever, goes back to my days as a kid growing up in South Dade, Miami. I love trying to go out there and pick me a bonefish or two off those flats.
All right,
what's about that whole experience,
Oh, I agree with you. I don't understand. It doesn't seem to be as popular as it used to be, and I really don't understand why, because I think it's an absolute blast. What's your go-to bait? You're looking over there by that mangrove, and there's a 12-pound bonefish rooting right there. What are you throwing?
Well, it depends on what kind of day it is. If I'm going to throw a fly, I do like small shrimp patterns and crab patterns, but in general, I like to use, and I grew up doing it, if I'm not throwing a fly rod, I'm going to use what we call a wiggle jig. It's an old school bonefish jig, very flat head. It's got an old Mustad 2.0 on the back of it. It's you can use whatever you want to tie it with. One of my old buddies, Glemino, who taught me how to bonefish, used to tie all of our own flies, taught us all the patterns. And most of the time I like those browns. A little bit of pink in them sometimes if the water is not as clean, but if it's clean water, those light browns all the way up to like a medium dark brown-ish, something that's got that shrimp color or something that kind of mimics the color of a crab that's being hatched, a small blue crab. So it can have a little bit of blue in it and that kind of thing. And I'll just tip it just tiny. I'll just put a little tip of shrimp on the end of that jig. So I'll get that thing out there, and we used to blow those things up, fishing the feather beds and arsenics and all through the Keys as a kid. That was like the one thing we used to go out and do. And, if you had one or two a day, that was an awesome day, Rick.
I mean, the fish are still there, right?
It's been years. I do know that about the time I left, I was pretty much getting tired of the jet skis blowing across the flat. They did change some of those laws down there. They do have areas now that are pole zones. Which they had to. That's not only just to protect the fishermen, but to protect the grasses and stuff so the boats don't run over those flat areas. The arsenics in those areas I remember were fantastic. And, what's crazy now is I talk to some of my guys that are down there, and they're catching more redfish now than bonefish.
I'll be darned.
When I was a kid, we never even targeted redfish down there. They had to restock them after I left.
Yeah, there's a lot more redfish now there than there used to be. What have you heard from offshore? Anything?
Oh, man, offshore guys have been out. They've had some really good trips. The mangrove snappers are just coming in one after another. Just yesterday, I had to help one of my guys. He did a late night trip, and he came back in the morning early and to clean up the fish for their clients, and he had another trip booked for that morning. So we had to zip through 60 mangrove snappers, and he had lanes and everything else in there. It was crazy. But the fishing out there has been very good. They're still doing very well in the red grouper. The thing is, they're catching all these gags and stuff too, but they can't keep them. So, it is what it is. They're catching red snapper, like they're getting out of the way and going crazy on them. They have to leave because it's all they catch, but can't keep them, so they got to move out. And it is what it is. I did see a few really nice mutton snapper this week come in, and some very nice porgies. I just can't get these people to let me have one. I don't know what's going on, Rick.
I understand. Cap, as always, we appreciate your report so much. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it. See you next week, Rick.
Thank you, Greg. Now we're going to pull up into the West Central region and check in with our buddy Ray Markham. Ray, how are you?
By golly, I'm sitting here in the sunshine enjoying life.
That's a good thing. I almost kind of hope winter's not completely over, but darn if it doesn't feel like it, doesn't it?
Well, I completely agree with you. I wouldn't mind having another month of, regular weather, what normally is supposed to be here with, an occasional cold front about once a week. Maybe temperatures getting down into the 60s and then back up into the 70s. Now, we will have a little bit of a change later on in the week, probably Wednesday, Thursday or something here in West Central with a mild front that's coming down, and we'll probably see something close to that. But it's not going to have any long-term effects on what's been going on, and what has been going on has been outrageous. I think we're way ahead of time here, and it wouldn't even surprise me to start seeing tarpon just about any time.
How about that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, starting last week, guys were catching kingfish, and I gave my buddy Ben Hubbard a buzz down there in Englewood. He fishes out in that neck of the woods, and I figured, well, I know they'll be there before they come here, and he said they've been on them for several days prior, and along with a lot of Spanish mackerel, which we already have here, and things are really piping up. I mean, you got a bunch of guys that are running these kingfish tournaments, and they're just kind of shaving at the bit because last year's COVID issues prevented a lot of that from running the tournament. So this will be a really good year, I think. Guys have been off the water, and things have been, everything's been getting a rest, so to speak. But I think it's time, and I think the fish are ready. So a lot of inshore stuff going on, a lot of good stuff. I mean, the redfish has been mediocre, but the trout fishing's been great. We've caught trout to about 23, 24 inches over the past week. Lots of snook. And actually, the guys on the north region from northern part of Hernando and Citrus, they've been waxing the redfish up in that area. In fact, I went up one day last week towards the middle end of the week and fished with Captain Brian Chamberlain, who fishes out of Chesapeake, and we had a really good day sight fishing redfish. He's got an incredible boat up there with a Sabine running a mud motor, and that thing, honest to gosh, will run easily in a couple inches of water. Don't have that with a lot of boats. You can get to where fish are, and nobody else can, and that was the beauty of it.
Now, Ray, I'm assuming as shallow as you guys were getting, did these fish have their backs out of the water?
Some.
Isn't that the coolest thing ever?
It is amazing, but the neat thing about that up there's a whole lot of limestone bottom. And you got mud, you got lime rock, you got some grass patches, and surrounded by that 0 to 1 or 2 inches of water, you may have potholes that are 5-6 feet deep. And these fish will get holed up in these holes, and it's shooting fish in a barrel. That's bottom line. We didn't keep any fish at all. We just, went up and stretched a string and had a great time.
That's fantastic.
That's my kind of fishing.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother, 100%. Well, I hope this next cold front doesn't mess you up too much, but I'm ready for a little bit of chill back in the air again. It sounds like every area we've talked to, Ray, things have come alive on this increase in temperature. Thank you, buddy. We appreciate it.
You betcha. We'll catch you later, Cap.
Catch you next week. Now, we're going to pull up into the Big Bend, and if the traffic's not too bad in downtown Homosassa, maybe we can track down William Toney. William, is that you I see on the other end of that crowd?
That's right. You know, I'm directing those golf carts. They better slow down and feed the sand gnats.
That's right. Can we feed the Yankees to the sand gnats? Will that work? Will they leave us alone then?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes their blood isn't as thick as the Floridians, so they don't get fed as well. So they just got to eat whatever they can.
Well, William, you know me. I'm a veritable sand gnat buffet, buddy. I mean, if they're looking for thick blood, if they're looking for too lazy to swat them, they're probably in really good shape biting me.
When we get the sand gnat bite, that means we got good warm weather. So that's a plus of the sand gnat.
You know, William, it is, but I felt like we had cold enough weather this year to kill them. Didn't you get a freeze or two over there?
We did, but I think they really like it. But I tell you what, this past week, all the way up till the day, the warm weather and the sand gnats and the fishing all are in force and all going for it.
What are you catching?
Well, right now, a little bit of everything. As I wrote my report this week, it is pelagic time. We got Spanish mackerel, bluefish, jack crevalles, pompanos, and if you want to get close to the rocks, it's trout, it's sea bass. And further out is sheepshead madness out about 14 to 18 foot, along with hogfish and mangrove snapper.
Ah, so the spawn has started for the sheepshead, huh?
Yep. They actually bite pretty good inshore back in January and late December, but they move out. So the anglers out there in about 18 to 21 feet, that's where a lot of the people are getting the hogfish also, are loading up on the sheepshead. Now, I have to say, Rick, some of the pictures I saw with, 45 and 60 sheepshead is crazy overkill. I mean, on my boat, 20 is max on board. If I got 4 people, they get 5 apiece. If, it's just one guy and they want to, keep 8 or 9 if they're feeding the family or having some kind of reunion, I guess. But, that's a lot of fish. And there's plenty of them out there, but I don't know how long that's going to last when you start filling a cooler like that.
I got to be honest with you. I'm starting to learn so much about that watching our offshore fishery here in Northeast Florida. Since they took red snapper away from us, William, it moved all the fishing pressure further offshore from 140 feet out to 160 feet, where it's usually triggerfish, vermilion, scamp grouper, that type stuff. And now we've just pounded that so hard that our triggerfish are getting smaller. And now we've had way too liberal limits on triggers. We've had 10 per person, and they need to cut that badly. But I'm telling you, if people don't think that we have a huge effect on fish, they're not paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sheepshead, they're out there spawning. So, the ones that a lot of them are at the table are full of roe. And, I guess there's abundance of them. But I've seen it in the past when you start hammering them out like that, and it's going to definitely put an impact on them. And 15 sheepshead per person, and unless you are like I said, going to have a church picnic, family reunion, fish fry, that's an awful lot of fish, And some of the sheepshead are pretty nice size. They're catching 8 and 10 pound ones out there. So is this something to look at, or just something maybe have some little bit of your own type of regulations on board to save some of them fish? I mean, it may hold out forever, or they may take a big hit, and one day we'll see that they're going to be harder to catch.
Well, you and I have talked about that plenty, and I have set limits on everything on my boat, and there's some fish. Well, vermilion snapper, for example, I think our limit of 5 is fine, and so keep our 5 per person if we want to. They seem to have held up well through the 50 years that I've been chasing them. But mahi and wahoo and triggerfish and scamp grouper and a lot of that stuff, cobia especially. The limit on my boat on cobia is 1 per person. It's not 2. Even though here in federal waters it's 2, but it's not 2 on my boat because I've seen the cobia, start to decline, and I don't like what I see. So all we can do is what we can do on our boats, Cap.
Absolutely. Captain Charlie Phillips, the president of the Florida Guide Association, he wrote a really good, from the crow's nest this week. I read it this morning about the cycles of a sportsman. When you're young into the sport and you're gung-ho after it, then the next thing, it could be with bucks and deer, it could be with fish. Laying all those fish on the table gives you the satisfaction that you did well. And then we grow out of that. Then you get to the next level of targeting fish different ways or releasing fish and catching fish as you grow older and keeping just what you need for dinner, especially if you live along the coastal areas where, you got easy access to water. I understand, there's folks that live inland and can't go all the time and limits are there for them and to get it. But, there comes a time and a place where, we're all going to have to start thinking about that collectively.
I couldn't agree with you more. Some of those church picnics are going to have to become BYOF. Bring your own fish.
Exactly.
You got it. As always, we so appreciate your report. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Yep, I'll be right down here in downtown Homosassa.
Thank you, William. Now, can't leave Florida till we go to Lower Alabama. That's where we find one Captain Tyler Massey in the Pensacola area. Tyler, what's going on out in the Panhandle?
Hey, Rick, how are y'all doing over there?
It's too hot. I want a little bit of chill back, but not much.
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready for spring.
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, it's been pretty decent weather over here. We had some good fishing days over the last week or so that's been nice for a change. The fishing wasn't as good as we had hoped for, but it's pretty typical for this time of year. We're kind of in a transitional period between the winter and the spring, and a lot of stuff changes here in those few months, So, we just start seeing a lot of life, a lot of bait showing up, different species, but we're just not quite there yet. So, inshore, sheephead, black drum, redfish, fishing around structures is your best bet. The flats haven't really sparked off yet. Trout aren't on the flats. They're not on the dock. The redfish aren't there either. So, you kind of focus on your structure, and because they're always going to hold some sort of fish. So that's what we've been doing inshore, focusing on structure.
So it's been mostly sheep's head and drum for you inshore, huh?
Yep, that's it. And, it hasn't been consistent either. One day you'll catch, a handful of them. Next day you go to the same areas, don't catch any. So, it's just been real hit or miss for us. Nothing you can, set your watch to, but it's getting better and it'll continue to get better the next few weeks for sure.
Gotcha. Now, when's your next offshore opening? What opens up first for you, grouper?
So triggerfish actually opened today.
Okay.
Offshore, so that'll be our next one. Scamp grouper will be open. It's open inside of the 20 fathom line, so shallower than 120 foot, you're allowed to keep scamp. Past that, it's closed. And then red snapper and grouper open in June, and then I think we do get 1 month of May for amberjack. So we have some good fishing, coming up in the next few months. So we're really looking forward to being able to keep something out there.
What's your limit on triggerfish?
1 per person, 15 inches.
Oh, I would die. I would die.
It's pretty frustrating, but we take what we can get.
I would take my dog and my cat and my bird and everything else. All right, the dog caught that one and the cat caught that one, and triggerfish are the one fish that I'm powerless against. But you be proud of me. Over here, our limit is 10 per person, and I have cut it to 5 on my boat, but I don't want to go any less than that as the best eating fish in the ocean. Tyler, when will your pelagic start showing up? When will they start trolling for them?
We just need some warmer water. It's still a little cold offshore. I'd say the mid to end of April is when it starts to get, pretty good. And then all the way through the summertime. So we just need that warmer water to push in a little closer to our beach. There are a few wahoo around right now. So a buddy of mine did catch one in the 60-pound range a couple days ago, but it was just one, and he put a pretty good effort in. So not a lot of action right now. You can still pick up a stray here and there, but the next few weeks, as the water warms up, we're going to see some more action from the pelagic.
Man, that's a long day for one fish. Thank you so much, and please tell me that we can talk with you next week.
We'll be here. We'll see you.
Captain Tyler Massey checking in from the Pensacola region. Hey, look, it's been a lot of fun tonight. It's been an interesting trip around the state. A lot of places, the offshore fish just seem to have the blahs. We're not getting the tuna and wahoo, we should be in Northeast Florida. They're doing pretty good on sales in East Central, but not a lot to go with them. If you'll remember, down in the Southeast, there were plenty of mahi a few weeks ago. They seem to have petered out a little bit. Now it's kingfish and the occasional sail. Nick Stanczyk's catching swordfish. That's like saying the sun came up tomorrow. That happens every day, and I'm so proud to be associated with him. But gosh, what a master swordfish fisherman he has become. Now, when you come around through the 10,000 Islands, William Toney's always got a great report. They've got such great fishing down there and are able to take advantage of some real shallow water action, both him and Greg Stamper as you come up the coast. Ray Markham was so impressed with the way things are going there. When we get these warming trends, the trout and reds and snook get really, really active. As we headed out west a little bit, William Toney, the same thing, said he is starting to see a lot of trout and a lot of reds. Now, Pensacola is still pretty cold. Tyler Massey told us that it's pretty much sheephead and drum right now. The reds and trout haven't started yet. Gosh, we've had a lot of fun making the trip, though. I tell you what, I'm so thankful we get to do this every week, and I hope you enjoy it. If you enjoy our podcast, please go on wherever you get your podcasts and rate us and subscribe to it. And if you've got a question for any of our podcasters, leave it on Florida Sportsman's Facebook or email me at rick@floridasportsman.com, and we'll make sure we put your question on the air and get the answer that you're looking for. Just like every other week, this week's podcast was brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people back to nature. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Until next week, for Florida Sportsman Magazine, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and we'll see you on the rip.